300 men surrounded 135,000 warriors. Not a single sword among them. The Midianite camp below was a sea of tents. Impossible odds. 450 to 1. In the dark, the 300 encircled the valley. They clutched torches and trumpets, no weapons. Each man hid a torch in a clay pitcher. At the signal, they'd smash them and blow trumpets.
This horn is all I have. No sword, just fire and noise.
Gideon raised his trumpet. The night held its breath. God had promised victory with just 300. The math defied all logic.
Why did God strip us to nothing? The math makes no sense.
The Midianites slept, unaware that their destruction was already ordained. This is the story of Gideon and the 300. How God destroyed an army without a single sword. To understand the impossible victory on that hill, we must go back months earlier. For 7 long years, the Midianites had invaded, stealing every crop and every animal. Gideon was forced to thresh wheat inside a winepress, hidden from the raiders who roamed freely.
If they see me, they will take everything. I cannot lose this.
He was the youngest son from the weakest clan, considered the least in his family.
My father says I am nothing. I am not a warrior. How can God even see me?
Every day, the people of Israel lived in terror of the relentless Midianite hordes.
God has abandoned us. There is no hope left in this land.
And then, on one ordinary afternoon, everything changed forever. Into that winepress, a visitor came, one who called this frightened farmer a military war hero. The visitor who appeared in that dusty winepress was no ordinary man. It was the angel of the Lord himself.
The Lord is with you, mighty warrior.
Mighty warrior. He must be joking. Is he talking to me? Sir, if the Lord is with us, why has all this trouble happened? Where are all his miracles that our ancestors told us about?
Go in the strength you have. Am I not sending you?
My clan is the weakest, and I am the least in my father's house.
I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving no one alive.
He calls me to save Israel. I can barely save myself from the Midianites.
The angel's words planted a seed of impossible hope in the heart of a stubborn, frightened farmer. But the journey from that winepress toward the night on the hill, with torches and trumpets, had only just begun. Gideon knew he needed more than divine promise. He needed proof, a sign that God was truly with him.
If he is sending me, then I must trust. But I need to see his power.
Then he blew the trumpet, and men came. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. By the time the dust settled, 32,000 warriors stood ready, an army of light against the vast darkness.
So many. Surely now we can face them.
But God's response shattered that confidence.
You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands.
Gideon stared at the sea of faces. Too many. The math was upside down.
Why does he want fewer soldiers? This makes no sense.
The first impossible command had been given. But the real test had not yet begun.
Tell them to leave? After all this, they'll think I've lost my mind.
But he obeyed. Facing the sea of faces, Gideon delivered God's impossible order.
Whoever is afraid, leave Mount Gilead and go home.
22,000 men turned and walked away. The army of 32,000 collapsed to 10,000.
2/3 vanished in a breath. The Midianites will swallow us whole.
Gideon stared at the reduced force. 10,000 men, but the Midianite horde was 135,000.
Still too many. Take them to the water. I will sort them there.
What does water have to do with war? He is sifting out something I don't see.
He led the 10,000 down to the river, where the second test would reveal a hidden truth, not by sword or strength, but by how a man drank. God would choose his instruments. The 10,000 descended into the river gorge, breaking the water's surface under Gideon's anxious gaze.
What do I look for? How a man drinks. It seems absurd.
Some men knelt low, burying their faces in the cool stream, unaware of the world. Others scooped water with their hands, lapping like watchful dogs, eyes scanning the horizon.
I won't drop my guard even for a drink. The enemy could be near.
Samuel's tongue lashed the water from his cupped palms, his gaze never leaving the ridgeline. Gideon observed the two groups, the oblivious and the vigilant, and a pattern began to form.
God is separating something. But which group serves his purpose?
He did not yet understand the test, but the mathematics of faith were about to shrink further. As the last man drank, Gideon waited for the divine directive that would change everything.
Those who lapped water with their hands like dogs, set them apart. The rest go home.
The lappers? There are so few of them. He is stripping us to the bone.
9,700 men turned and walked away, bewildered, their footsteps a hollow drumbeat. When the dust settled, exactly 300 men remained, huddled on the riverbank under the dying sun.
300. Against a sea of tents. We are shadows against the flood.
In the distance, 135,000 tents sprawled across the valley like a monstrous, slumbering beast.
The math is a death sentence. What have we done?
I don't understand his ways, but the voice was clear. I must trust.
From 32,000 to 300 in two merciless cuts. The impossible now stood undeniably before them, but the Lord's design was not yet complete. The weapons of this war would be revealed only at the midnight hour. In the stillness of that night, the voice of the Lord spoke again to Gideon with a promise that defied all reason.
With these 300 men who lapped the water, I will save Israel and give the Midianites into your hand.
300 to save a nation. My eyes must be lying to me.
The campfires of 135,000 men flickered in the valley below, a mocking proof of the impossible odds.
He said it. I wanted to believe, but my heart still trembles.
We have no plan, no formation. How can a river trick turn into a battle?
But the Lord's strategy was already in motion, hidden from every mortal eye.
He didn't tell me how, only that he would do it. Maybe that's enough.
Samuel stared at the thousands of tents, and the holy terror on his face mixed with a spark of impossible hope. The next command would transform this fragile faith into a battle cry that would echo through eternity. Gideon gave the order, and the final pieces of God's strategy were passed into the hands of the 300.
Every man take a torch, a clay pitcher, and a trumpet. Nothing else.
No swords, no shields. Are we walking into the grave on purpose?
Hands that ached for spear shafts, closed around fragile clay and hollow bone.
This pitcher will shatter at the first blow. What use is it in a battle?
But the men of Israel had learned one thing. When God speaks, even madness must be trusted.
I don't know how these weapons will win, but I know whose hand guides them.
Samuel looked at the trumpet in his own hands, and for the first time, the terror in his eyes flickered into something else.
Maybe the Lord doesn't need my sword. Maybe he just needs my obedience.
The 300 stood ready in the dark, no longer an army, but an instrument of divine confusion.
How can I not tremble? This is madness. Fire and clay against an ocean of steel.
But Gideon had climbed the hill to be alone with the God who called him.
Lord, I am still the least in my father's house. Let it be your hand, not ours.
He stretched his hands toward heaven, a shadow against the stars, and his fear became a whisper.
This horn will be my voice when I have no words.
He remembered home, the fields his people lost, the fear in his mother's eyes, and the image of the horde burned in his mind.
If he carried us this far, perhaps he will carry us through.
One by one, the 300 lifted their torches, a silent covenant under the stars.
When you hear my trumpet, break the pitchers and blow yours. Then shout, for the Lord and for Gideon.
The men gripped their clay vessels, and the night deepened, waiting for the cry that would shake the world. Under a sliver of moon, the 300 began their silent descent toward the valley of death.
One wrong step, one cough, and we are dead men.
Gideon led them to the very edge of the Midianite camp, where the stench of camels and cook fires hung in the air. Each man found his post, his torch hidden behind a clay wall, a fragile secret.
We are frogs in a snake pit. One glint of fire and the beast will wake.
He raised a trembling hand, the signal of silence. The 300 became a stone.
A sentry below is looking up. Breathe. Don't move.
The Midianite guard squinted at the hillside, then turned back to his fire, dismissing the shadows. Silence draped the valley. Only the distant snort of a horse broke the stillness. Gideon lifted the trumpet to his lips. The next breath would split history in two. Every man of the 300 fixed his eyes on Gideon, clutching his clay pitcher as if it were his own beating heart.
Samuel's breath caught. The horn touched Gideon's lips, and the future shrank to this single instant.
Gideon whispered one last prayer. Lord of hosts, let my weakness be your strength.
Then he straightened, the trumpet rising, and the silence tightened like a drawn bowstring.
The blast is coming. God of Abraham, do not let our faith fail now.
The 300 stood on the precipice of a madness that had become a holy command.
Gideon's mind repeated the promise. With these 300 I will save Israel.
He filled his lungs, and the first cool pressure of the horn met his lips.
Samuel squeezed his trumpet. The clay was cold, the fire hot. It was now or never.
In the next heartbeat, the night would erupt with fire and sound that the world would never forget. Gideon's lungs emptied into the horn. A piercing blast tore through the stillness. In perfect unison, 300 men smashed their clay pitchers against the rocks. Fire erupted on every hillside as the torches blazed, turning night into day. Trumpets answered the signal, and the valley shook with a roar of holy war. The shout rose in a wave. A sword for the Lord, and for Gideon, the sound hammered into the Midianite camp like a physical blow, warping the air.
No sword, only fire and noise, and yet the ground trembles.
Midianite warriors stumbled from their tents, blinking against the blazing ring of fire. In their terror, they saw enemies everywhere. Shadows became swords in the flickering light. Panic ignited. The first Midianite screams were not from wounds, but from sheer terror. Midianite warriors snatched swords and spears from the ground, their minds shattered by the deafening uproar. In the flickering light, every face looked like the enemy. A soldier struck down his own brother. Tents collapsed as men trampled over each other, desperate to escape the nightmare of fire and noise.
They are cutting each other down. The Lord's hand is invisible, but the blood is real.
The confusion became a stampede. Soldiers fled in all directions, crushing their own wounded. The Midianite commanders' tents went up in flames, their orders swallowed by the crackling roar. Silhouettes of flailing arms and plunging swords danced on the tent walls, a puppet show of death. Panicked horses reared, throwing their riders before trampling through rows of tents. A Midianite soldier stared into the dark, eyes wide, and drove his sword into the chest of his own squad leader. Weapons slipped from trembling hands, only to be picked up by the next man convinced he was surrounded by foes. The valley became a furnace. Tents collapsed in roaring columns of fire, and the air turned to smoke. Midianite soldiers fled in every direction, but the panic had turned the camp into a death trap. The stampede crushed those who fell. The screams of the dying mixed with the crackle of flames. Samuel ran through the carnage, torch and trumpet still in his hands, without striking a single blow.
Not one of us has drawn a sword. The Lord is fighting for us.
On the hilltop, Gideon stood motionless, watching the impossible unfold from an eagle's view. The chaos was a maelstrom of fire and fleeing shadows. A Midianite warrior, trampled by his own comrades, reached for a sword he would never lift again. A riderless horse galloped through the flames, its eyes wild with terror. The 135,000 warriors destroyed themselves, and not a single Israelite had been wounded. Samuel sprinted through the wreckage, leaping over bodies and scattered weapons, his torch a lone streak of light.
This isn't a battle. It's a divine execution.
He saw a Midianite commander cut down by 3 of his own men, who then fled screaming into the darkness. The valley was carpeted with the fallen, Midianite armor glinting in the firelight like scattered embers.
All this without us lifting a finger.
Gideon still stood on the hill, unmoving, watching the smoke rise from what was once an army. Samuel stopped, breathing hard. Surrounded by silence and the smell of death, the 300 began to gather, their torches dying, their faces masks of shock and awe.
We are not warriors. We are witnesses.
The night of fire was fading. The first gray light of dawn touched the hills, and the valley was still. Dawn unveiled the scale of the miracle. The valley was a graveyard of Midianite ambition. The 300 emerged from their positions, walking among the fallen, their torches now smokeless sticks.
In all this carnage, not one of our brothers lies still. The Lord is our shield.
Gideon descended the hillside, his hands open and empty. He had not touched a blade. He dropped to his knees in the ash, his prayer silent, the ground still warm from the fires of heaven's wrath. The 300 gathered around their leader, men of faith embracing, their laughter mingled with tears. Gideon touched the horn at his side, the instrument that had heralded the impossible.
We were nothing, but he was everything. The battle was his alone.
Amid the ruin, a single Midianite tent still stood, a hollow testament to the storm that had passed. And, as Gideon looked up, a beam of golden light pierced the smoke, as if God was nodding.
Lord of hosts, you reduced us to prove that salvation is yours.
The 300 knelt with him, their cracked pots and silent trumpets bearing witness.
The miracle was not in the noise we made, but in the lesson he etched into our souls.
From the weakest clan, the least in his father's house, Gideon became the deliverer because God was with him. They did not just win a battle. They lost the illusion that strength comes from numbers. Gideon embraced his family, tears mixing with laughter. The least of Israel, now its greatest shield. Gideon's tears were not of sorrow, but of awe at the God who saves.
We will never boast in our own hands again.
The 300 stood as proof that the Lord alone brings deliverance. And as the sun rose over the broken camp, Israel learned that with God, fewer can be more than enough. Samuel found a rock apart from the others, the broken remnants of the night scattered around him.
This shard in my hand, it held a fire that startled an army.
The shattered pots and silent trumpets lay as witnesses to a victory no human hand could claim.
God didn't need our swords. He needed our trust.
He looked out over the still valley, the smoke columns thinning, the cries of the dying long gone now.
He reduced us to the least, so we would know. The glory is never ours. Yesterday I hid in fear. Today I kneel in awe. Lord, you took 22,000 home and kept me. Why? Only your mercy.
The terror on his face softened into a quiet resolve, a holy fear born of understanding. Samuel was no longer a farmer hiding from Midian. He was a stone in the foundation of a new Israel. The Lord allowed no room for human pride. 32,000 would have boasted. 300 could only point to heaven. The victory was absolute and divine, leaving no trace of human strategy to brag about. The water test was never about thirst. It was a mirror revealing the posture of every man's heart. The 300 were not the bravest men in Israel. They were simply the ones who never forgot the enemy was near.
Now I understand. Every reduction was a mercy, stripping away our false confidence.
God's purpose was never to ruin, but to restore, a people who trusted wholly in his hand.
So the night of terror was a night of birth. Israel was reborn without her arrogance.
In the end, the shards of pottery and silent trumpets declared a truth no sword could voice. This lesson anchored the soul of Israel, a bedrock faith for the storms yet to come. The sun climbed higher over the valley of bones, and a holy stillness filled the land. The 300 stood on the ridge like ancient stones, their faces turned toward the rising sun. The light that had scattered the enemy now crowned the victors in gold. The burned torches lay at their feet, silent testimony to a fire, not of this world.
They will sing songs of this night, but the melody is the same. The Lord fought for us.
I was nothing, but he made me a trumpet. Let Israel never trust in horses or chariots.
The silhouettes on the horizon became a monument, not of conquest, but of dependence. The valley below, once a furnace, now breathed the peace of a completed purpose. With shattered pots and silent horns, the 300 bore witness. The battle belongs to the Lord. And in that stillness, Samuel looked out over the graves of arrogance and whispered a final Amen. This is the story of Gideon and the 300, a reminder that with God, fewer is never insufficient. Samuel took one last look at the valley of ash and bone, then closed his eyes. Behind him, the battlefield lay silent, a testament written in ashes and broken steel. The light that had scattered the enemy now held the world in a quiet embrace. When he opened his eyes, he looked past the battlefield, past the hills, and for a moment, he saw only the faithfulness of God. The lesson of that night would be told for 1,000 generations, because the victory belongs to the Lord, and he will share his glory with no one. And on that hill, the 300 faded into the light, a story sealed in the scriptures. The horns were silent, the pots were shards, but the name of the Lord echoed forever. The screen fades to black, and the words remain. Gideon and the 300. When God is with you, fewer is never insufficient.